Hey, did you go drinking again? It's the third time this week. When I come home and see that I have to deal with someone like you, an annoying old woman, I can't help but feel disgusted. I have to drink just to tolerate it. Lately, it's been every weekend, and now even on weekdays. Men have social obligations, you know. I work too, you know. Sometimes you should come home early and be a companion for Tom. What do I care? Taking care of the child is the wife's job. Lately, my husband and I have been arguing like this every day. We've been married for 12 years, and his habit of wasting money is a constant headache for me. I'm Kelly, 36 years old. I've continued working even after getting married. My husband is 2 years older than me. Since we aged together and he calls me an old woman, it naturally makes me think he's an old man. Even though I try not to retort in the same way to avoid escalating the argument, we still constantly disagree on matters related to money and our child. I work for a fairly large company, and they have a good maternity and childcare leave system. So my return to work after having a child went smoothly. I have no complaints about my job. My husband also works for the same company, but he changed departments after my return, so we rarely see each other at work. My husband is currently in the sales department, so he has more social commitments than me in the general affairs department, and I understand that he often can't leave work on time. But still, I can't help but think about it. My husband has never once helped with dropping off or picking up our child from daycare. Hey, why don't you pick up our child from time to time? That's your job. Besides, I never even wanted a child in the first place. But the child is already born. It's pointless to say that now. You said that seeing him would make me feel attached, but that is not true. I don't feel attached to him at all. He doesn't even like me. That's because you never play with him. Even when Tom tries to talk to you, you ignore him. I want to relax on my days off. I can't be bothered to take care of the child. Our only son, Tom, is now in the 4th grade of elementary school. He's at an age where he can understand many things. He's surely aware that his father is indifferent towards him. Tom used to talk to him a lot when he was younger, but my husband would just give short and dismissive responses. Hey, Dad! Listen! What? I'm watching TV right now. Don't bother me. I'm sorry. Hey, you can't say things like that. Shut up! I'm tired from work every day. Unlike you in the general affairs department, sales requires a lot of consideration. Don't make me tired, even on my days off. It's the same old story. My husband is completely uninvolved in school events and parenting. He has never attended a parent-teacher day or a sports day. It feels like I'm practically a single mother. Even our son has stopped initiating conversations with his father. On top of that, my husband splurges on himself without buying anything for his son. He bosses around the house, and my frustrations keep growing. I try not to complain too much, but I can't help but do so, and there's a reason for that. Actually, when our child turned 3 years old, my husband's death came to light. Since we both work, we split the living expenses, so I didn't know how my husband was using his salary. But since our child was born, our living expenses increased accordingly. Naturally, our respective shares of the expenses increased as well. We had an agreement to deposit predetermined amounts into a shared account for living expenses. However, even though we only increased it by $200 since our child was born, my husband frequently failed to deposit money on the specified date. When I confronted him, it was revealed that he had debt before we got married. What's more, the debt was still close to $30,000. When I asked him what the debt was for, how much he has been paying each month, and when he expects to pay it off, he just laughed foolishly and said it seemed like it would never end. Well, I've been paying it off with revolving payments, so even if I pay, the balance doesn't decrease at all. What? For a moment, I couldn't believe what this man was saying. In short, he's been making purchases every month that exceed his payments, but because he pays it off with revolving payments, the amount he pays remains the same, and as a result, the balance hasn't been decreasing, but rather increasing over the years. I was filled with anger at how reckless he was. He didn't even have the awareness of being a father. To prevent further wasteful spending, I stopped all the credit cards he had at the time. Even though he grumbled quite a bit, I sternly asked him what he would do if the debt continued to increase, and somehow managed to prevent him from using them. If it were money spent for the family, it would be one thing, but this was debt accumulated for his own luxury. It's only natural for an adult to take care of it themselves. However, because I wanted to repay it as soon as possible, I increased the monthly payment amount, so I ended up covering the majority of the living expenses. It has been 7 years since then, and the debt has long been paid off. Yet, the amount of money my husband contributes for living expenses is less than before. When I asked him to increase the money he covers for the living expenses, he came up with the excuse that I earn more and stubbornly refused to increase it. He thinks it's only natural for the one with a higher salary to contribute more as a family. My husband's sales performance is not great either. He's been left behind by his peers and is just rotting away, so he's not committed to his work. That's why he hasn't been promoted. I was promoted to the General Affairs Department manager 2 years ago. As a result, my salary increased compared to my husband's. However, my husband wasn't pleased with that either. I tried to give him advice to motivate him, but he didn't like that either. He said, "What do you know about sales? Don't meddle unnecessarily," and completely ignored my words. Since everything I said only led to arguments, I gradually became less inclined to say anything. Then, one day, my husband told me he was going back to his hometown for a high school reunion. To be clear, his parents had already passed away, and his older brother and his wife live in the family home. My husband and his brother don't get along well and have no interaction at all. They had a dispute over the inheritance when their father passed away 5 years ago. His brother and his wife had been taking care of my mother-in-law, who required nursing care for many years. My husband had completely stayed out of it. I also felt sorry about it, but I had work and couldn't easily go and help. Since our child was born, I had been handling most things on my own, so I couldn't visit my in-laws much, and my mother-in-law passed away 3 years before my father-in-law. That was 1 year before my husband's death came to light. So apparently, my father-in-law had left a will stating that all the assets should be left to my brother-in-law and his wife. I thought it was only natural and told my husband it was okay. However, my husband didn't like that and made outrageous claims. In the end, they reached an agreement to my brother-in-law paying the rightful share. But my brother-in-law got angry at my husband's attitude at the time and told him not to be involved anymore. Knowing all of that, I feel uncomfortable seeing my brother-in-law and his wife, and I haven't had any contact with them since my father-in-law passed away. With the money my husband received at that time, he settled his remaining debt. That's when I found out that even though he claimed he couldn't contribute to living expenses because he increased his revolving payment, he still had over half of the balance remaining. It was a ridiculous lie. He hadn't been contributing to living expenses under the pretense of increasing payments, but had been using it for his own entertainment expenses. It was absurd. When I complained about it, he shamelessly said, "Well, in the end, it got settled, didn't it? And it's because you stopped me from using my cards that my available money decreased." I have no choice but to get it from the living expenses. He completely brushed it off. That's how my brother-in-law cut ties with us. So even if he says he's going back to his hometown, there's no way he can stay at his family home. When I asked where he would be staying, he said he had booked a hotel nearby. It was somewhat sad to think that he couldn't even visit the house where he was born and raised, especially since he was returning to his hometown. However, I chose not to mention it, and saw him off. Daddy, aren't you leaving home today? Yeah, that's right. As I watched my husband happily leave, our son called out to him from behind. What's more, our son seemed somewhat pleased to know that his father wouldn't be coming home. It made me realize, once again, that my son didn't want his father to be around. And I realized that I felt the same way. Since it's Saturday and Mommy doesn't have work, why don't we go out and dine out? Really? Yeah. Yay! Feeling relieved that my husband isn't around, I started to think seriously about our future. But since that high school reunion day, my husband started going out more often. He goes out a lot, especially on his days off, and stays out all night more often. He seems unusually cheerful, and he keeps his cell phone close to him, whereas before he used to leave it lying around on the table. It seems like he even takes it with him to the bathroom and shower. It's suspicious, no matter how you look at it. Hey, you have been going out more often lately, haven't you? Where do you go? Just thought I'd work out a bit, so I've been going to the gym on my days off. You know, when you're in your late 30s, your physical strength starts to decline. Oh, really? Do gyms have accommodations too? No, but sometimes I end up having drinks with friends all night. When you are in good shape, you can drink more. I see. Are you going to keep exercising and play sports with Tom too? Yeah, that could be an option. His eyes were evasive. I looked at him with a cold gaze, thinking that if it was a lie, he could have come up with a better one. In my mind, my husband's affair was already confirmed. I could have hired a private investigator, but for the time being, I decided to follow him when he goes out. My husband boarded the train and got off at the station near his parents' house. There, a young woman was waiting in a car, and my husband happily got into the car. Since his behavior had changed after the reunion, I had assumed the woman was a former classmate, but she now clearly appeared to be in her 20s. Nevertheless, I couldn't help but think. He spends recklessly, doesn't spend time with our son, and now I suspect he's cheating. It has become ridiculous to even be together. I made up my mind to leave my husband and started preparing for it. Well, I'm heading out. I might stay at a friend's place tonight. Oh, I see. Take care. It was the perfect opportunity, or so I thought. However, just then, I discovered that my credit card was missing from my wallet. I remember having it there until yesterday. Since I hadn't taken it out or used it, I couldn't think of anywhere I might have lost it. I immediately contacted the credit card company and reported it as lost. They asked me for the last time I used it, but I couldn't remember exactly when it was. I checked the transaction records on my computer and provided them with the information. Fortunately, they informed me that it hadn't been used since then, so that was a relief. I hadn't lost it or taken it out of my wallet, so why did it disappear? There was only one answer, without even having to think about it. My husband must have taken it from my wallet. It was the only explanation I could come up with. I thought that my husband would do it. For the past 6 months or so, my husband had been receiving collection letters from various credit card companies. I guess his own cards had reached their credit limit. When he settled his debt, he must have secretly applied for new cards, and not just one, but several. I had chosen to ignore it, thinking that since he would be the one paying it off, there was no need to say anything. But stealing someone else's card? That just makes him a plain thief. In any case, I'm glad I noticed it early. I started packing my husband's belongings right away. I know where he is. I had a private investigation agency find out who my husband's affair partner is. She's a 26-year-old woman who lives near his parents' house. She's about a decade younger than my husband. According to the investigation report, the woman he's been seeing is divorced and apparently moved back to her parents' house last year. Scott probably met her while she was working at the business hotel, where he stayed for a high school reunion. They lived in the same neighborhood and knew each other by sight, though they might have had an enjoyable chat. Scott has been frequently visiting her parents' house. He has known her parents by sight since he was a child, so maybe he feels comfortable going there. But do her parents let him stay over, even though they know he's still married? Well, that doesn't matter. I loaded Scott's belongings into the truck that arrived shortly and sent them off. Next up is our turn. I've canceled the credit card. Shall we move out too, Tom? Yeah, let's do that. Tom seems quite excited. When I told him we're going to live separately from his father, he responded, Absolutely! Just as Scott had long ceased to be my husband in my heart, he had ceased to be a father in Tom's eyes. I regretted that I didn't make this decision sooner. By nightfall, we had moved in our new place. We had completely moved out of the house we had been renting, turned off all utilities, and returned the keys in the presence of the real estate agent. While Tom and I were discussing what to have for dinner, a call came from Scott. Hey! What the hell is this? Why are you sending me my stuff? Everyone here is shocked. Well, you seem to be spending a lot of nights there. I thought it would be convenient if you had your personal belongings there. Stop kidding! Because of you, now Marilyn's parents know that I'm still married. You put the divorce papers in the shipment. Anyway, how did you know where I am? I hired a private investigator. Scott seemed to think his affair was still a secret. I was taken too lightly. Your actions are obvious. I was certain about the affair, but I didn't want to bother investigating who the woman was, as I also have a job. Besides, I wanted solid proof. Proof? It's better to have evidence of the affair to get as much educational expenses for our son as possible. When I come home, you'll pay for this. Home? Where's that? Of course, I mean our house! Oh, I see. You still had the intention of coming back home. That's surprising. Just as the saying goes, it seemed like my husband Scott came back to our home the following day. He must have been shocked to see our old house. Despite the fact that I had sent him filled out divorce papers, it puzzles me why he would think that I would still be in that house. What's more, he tried to use my card today, and was embarrassed to find out that it didn't work. Well, of course, I reported the card as missing. Oh, and I also reported it as stolen to the police. What? Scott's voice was high-pitched. It was obvious that he was anxious about possibly being arrested. But to tell you the truth, I wouldn't be satisfied unless he felt at least that much. I did report it to the police, but sadly, they said that as Scott was a family member, he wouldn't be charged with theft. Furthermore, according to the credit card company, if a family member living with you steals and uses your credit card, it's considered the card owner's responsibility, so the charges won't be waived, which means that I have to pay. I wish I had noticed before it had been used. Scott's infidelity was proven, and the divorce went smoothly. I reported my divorce to the company. As my last name would change, it's a rule to report it as soon as possible when a divorce happens. Incidentally, when I was asked the reason, I slipped out because of Scott's infidelity, and the news quickly spread throughout the company. As a result, Scott has earned the scorn of his colleagues and seems to be getting a lot of cold looks. Furthermore, our company has strict ethical guidelines, so Scott has been demoted and reassigned to work in a branch office. Up until now, I had been paying for most of our living expenses, so naturally, if he continues to spend money as he did before, he will run out. He seems to have finally realized this. In addition to being demoted and having his salary further reduced, he seems to be living in poverty due to having to pay child support, and for the lavish spending he did with his own card. He's been late with his payment. His car has been suspended, and he can't get a new one because he's failing all the credit checks. He contacted me asking to lower the educational expenses for our son, but I couldn't care less, and there's no way I would lower it. Naturally, I firmly refused. Then, he had the audacity to say that he broke up with the woman he cheated on me with and wanted to reconcile with me. That's even more unthinkable. "Never contact me again," I said, and hung up the phone. The woman Scott cheated with not only knew Scott was married, but also hadn't told her parents. It seems that her previous divorce was due to her own infidelity as well, and her parents were furious when they found out. They disowned her and kicked her out of the house. Whether she got my contact information from Scott or not, she also directly called me to ask me to reduce the educational expenses for our son. It's simply unimaginable that she would even come to me with such a request. I refused, naturally, and she was sobbing on the other end of the line. Oh boy. I truly realized how tough being divorced is. Even so, now I'm living a very enjoyable life every day with my son, Tom. Tom seems to be much more relaxed and happier than when his dad was at home. If I had thought from the beginning that he wasn't there, there wouldn't be anything to expect. So it's truly refreshing. I plan to keep working hard at raising my son and my job from now on.